Hello, today we are going to replace the rollout diaphragm in the 441 57S regulator. The rollout diaphragm is one of the main components in our regulator that will need to be replaced if the regulator is venting or if there is a regular maintenance schedule. So today I'm going to show you how to replace that and what items to watch for to make sure you have a successful installation. First of all, you're going to need certain tools. You will need an adjustable crescent wrench, just a small one should do, a putty knife, 9/16 inch wrench, a ratchet with a 1/2 inch socket, an 11/16 wrench, and also a 15/16 wrench. These will be the tools that will allow you to disassemble the regulator and install the new diaphragm. So first of all, what we need to do is isolate the regulator. We need to make sure that our inlet pressure is off. Turn that valve off, and also turn off your outlet pressure. This will isolate the regulator. Ensure that you bleed off any excess gas that is already in the regulator per regulation. At this point, we will disconnect the control line. We will loosen the lock nut on the spring tower. The spring adjustment screw, you will need to rotate counterclockwise to take the pressure off the spring. Ensure that all pressure is off the spring, and then proceed to remove the bolts on the spring tower cap with your ratchet and 1/2 inch socket. Remove the cap and set aside. Ensure that you have removed our gasket for the spring tower. Remove our spring button. Ensure that the ball bearing is intact. Remove your spring. Now we'll proceed to take off the spring tower itself. Set the spring tower aside. Now, in a lot of cases, when you do remove the diaphragm assembly, you may have difficulty with the gasket, may have adhered to the lower diaphragm case, and in that case you will need your putty knife to make sure that you clean that completely. Make sure that you do not gouge that surface, because we need to make sure that that surface is nice and clean for the new diaphragm. In this case, we are fine here. So now we're going to remove this by turning the diaphragm assembly counterclockwise until it unscrews and loosens from your valve. At this point, we will fold the diaphragm down. We will and install this into the vise. There are two flat surfaces that you can grip on the diaphragm. Clamp those in, pull your diaphragm down, and using your 15/16 wrench, loosen your lock nut and remove. On your diaphragm stem, you have two O-rings. At this point, you would want to replace this O-ring. This should be a 902922 in our parts catalog. It is very important to remove that and replace that. Also at this time, since you have removed this stem, it is important to remove and replace the valve stem O-ring. Okay? So reinstallation of your new diaphragm. Start with your bottom plate. Make sure it makes a good seal here with the new O-ring. A little bit of silicone lube will be fine. Ensure that you do not use an oil-based lube on any Buna products. When you are installing your new diaphragm, make sure that the gasket, the paper gasket, is facing up toward the spring tower. If you notice on the diaphragm itself, we have a rubber surface, and on the inside there is a textured surface. Always make sure that the textured surface is up toward the spring and that the rubber area is toward the gas. Installing this, we'll just reverse what we did. Put on your diaphragm, put on your upper plate. Ensure that it is seated properly. This time you can roll down your diaphragm to get it out of the way so that you can install your lock washer and your lock nut. Again, using the vise and the flats. Tighten that in the vise, move that out of the way, and with your 15/16 wrench, tighten. Now, as you tighten the lock nut, make sure that you're holding on to the upper diaphragm plate. This will keep it from pinching the diaphragm as well as wrinkling it. So after that, you should be ready to reinstall the diaphragm. At this point, make sure that you have lubed your O-ring. Reinstalling. Place in a regulator. Tighten the diaphragm assembly down into your valve assembly. When it stops, do not do this hard. Back your diaphragm off 1/2 to 1 full turn. Put your fold in for the rollout. Ensure that the gasket is facing upward and make sure that it is seated inside the offset area. At this time, you're going to install your spring tower. You can see that I hold the travel indicator with 2 fingers to keep it up out of the way. Bring your spring tower in, drop the travel indicator foot into the top diaphragm plate. Starting with a squeezing motion toward the diaphragm when you first install it and at an angle. Once you've got all of the diaphragm tucked inside, make sure that you do not have any issues where the diaphragm is pinched or otherwise in the way of the rollout. Take a flashlight, look inside, make sure that your rollout is still intact, then reinstall your bolts for the spring tower. Make sure that you pull the bolts down evenly. So that you don't have the spring tower leaning to one side while you're tightening it down. This will ensure that you have a good, even seal all the way around the diaphragm. Run your fingers around the edge, feeling if there is any issues where the spring tower is leaning up or higher. This way you will know that you've got a nice even seal. Tighten your bolts down. At this time, you will reinstall your control line. Reinstall your spring. Ensure that the spring is placed inside your top plate properly. Do not forget your gasket. Replace the gasket as needed. Spring adjustment button. Ensure that, again, the ball bearing is still intact. Reinstall the top plate. Ensure all your bolts are torqued down properly. Crack open your outlet valve. Open your inlet valve. Pressurize your regulator. Then check your vent to see if the diaphragm is functioning properly. If at this time you have any problems with venting, you will need to reinstall the diaphragm again. Double check to make sure they aren't pinching. As you energize the regulator, you will see your travel indicator move up. That will tell you that it is operational.